Hello ladies and gentlemen, my name is iGoRawr and welcome to Let's Auraxium. And today we're going to be looking at a lot of guns. The NS-PDW, the MKV suppressed, the Sirius, the Eridani, and finally, the Skorpios, the gun rewarded to you for completing the SMG directive. Now you're probably wondering why I decided to review all 5 guns in one video. And the reason is, well, I originally intended this video to all be about the Skorpios, but to talk about the Skorpios, you pretty much have to review the Eridani, and to review the Eridani, you desperately need to compare it to the Sirius. Also, I've always kind of wanted to redo the video I did on the NS-PDW, because I really don't think I did a good job explaining myself as to why I didn't particularly care too much for the weapon. I decided to put the MKV suppressed in there because nothing puts a bigger smile on my face and a harder woody in my spandex than an excuse to make a video that is an absolute clusterfuck. The second reason I decided to do it is because it's my video, and I can do whatever I goddamn please. I mean, if I wanted to turn Let's Auraxium into a cooking show, I would. In fact, we're gonna do that, starting now. Yep, that's an egg. Alright. That's a banana. Huh. Oh. Cooking's hard. Okay, you know what? On second thought, we're not gonna do that. Anyways, so 5 SMGs, 1 review. This is bound to be an absolute clusterfuck, so sit back and enjoy watching a man lose his frickin' mind. Now with all that out of the way, let's look at the stats. So telling you a bunch of numbers and trying to be entertaining at the same time proved to be a little bit difficult, so I got some help from Mars Lettuce, the guy who animates the Planet Zerg videos. Seriously, he's great, you should go check him out. Anyways, he drew some fan art for me and I'm gonna share it with you on screen, and hopefully that'll be a bit more entertaining. So starting off with the NS-PDW, oh my god. Fuck it, we'll roll with it. Starting off with the NS-PDW, it has a fire rate of 750 rounds a minute, a damage model of 125 damage up to 15 meters, which is actually a very long range for a minimum damage, dropping off to 100 damage at 60 meters. It has a reload speed of 2.3 seconds for a short and 2.7 seconds for a long reload, with a magazine size of 30 rounds and a velocity of 400 meters per second. The standout features of the NS-PDW are its extremely long minimum damage range at 15 meters, and it also still has access to soft point ammo. It's tied for the highest velocity of all SMGs, and is the only SMG that drops 2 damage levels. Overall, it's trying to be a long-range SMG, which is kind of funny because it's an oxymoron like Jumbo Shrimp or Balanced Orion. Next is the MKV suppressed. With a fire rate of 779 rounds per minute, a damage model of 125 damage up to 10 meters, dropping off to 91 damage at 42 meters. With a reload speed of 2.6 seconds for a short and 2.8 seconds for a long reload, with a magazine size of 30 rounds and a velocity of 330 meters per second. The standout features of the MKV suppressed are that it's silenced by default, and has a pre-equipped black camo. Also, it's sort of shit. Next is the Sirius. With a fire rate of 845 rounds a minute, a damage model of 125 damage up to 6 meters, dropping off to 84 damage at 42 meters, with a reload speed of 2.4 seconds for a short and 3.4 seconds for a long reload, with a magazine size of 50 rounds and a velocity of 400 meters a second. The standout features of the Sirius are its large magazine with reload speeds that are nearly identical to other SMGs with much less ammo per magazine. It's tied for the highest velocity of all SMGs, and believe it or not, has a perfectly consistent recoil pattern with no left or right recoil bias. However, it does have tiny amounts of left and right pull from a recoil mechanic known as recoil tolerance. This mechanic is more difficult to explain than why there is a banana taped to your roof because you forgot to bring it down after filming. All you need to know is that the tiny bits of left or right bounce will be corrected by the gun itself and will recoil back in the direction that it came from. In short, it's the easiest one to handle, and also, at least in my opinion, it looks the most badass out of all of them. Seriously, it looks like somebody turned a small block Chev into a gun. It's great. And finally is the Eridani and the Skorpios. Both have fire rates of 750 rounds a minute with damage models of 143 damage up to 10 meters, but the Eridani reaches its minimum damage range at 40 meters at 91 damage, as where the Skorpios reaches its minimum damage at 48 meters. They have identical reload speeds of 1.7 seconds for a short and 2.8 seconds for a long reload, but the Eridani has a magazine size of 25 rounds versus the 35 rounds of the Skorpios, but keep in mind that the Eridani can equip an extended magazine to match the mag size of the Skorpios, as where the Skorpios is stuck with the extended magazine attachment. And finally are the velocities of 360 meters per second for the Eridani and 378 meters per second for the Skorpios. One final note about these two guns. The main thing that makes the Skorpios unique is that it actually has more aim down sights accuracy, but we'll talk a little bit more about that later. It's also worth mentioning that all SMGs in the game have identical cone of fire stats, not just Vanu and NS ones, but all of them, outside of the directive reward weapons. On top of that, they all have the same amount of cone of fire bloom when shooting from the hip and when aiming down sights, a unique trait only found in SMGs. And last but not least, they all have 0.75 ADS speed multipliers. Oh, finally I can stop talking about numbers and be entertaining again. But first, a word from our sponsors. This episode of Let's Auraxium is brought to you by New Conglomerate Propaganda Services. Whether it's political espionage or dragging someone's name through the mud, they got you covered. Just check out some of their fine work.
Bad, bad, bad. You're all...
This is the last time I work with NC engineers. I swear to Papa Vanu. So that brings us to our final question. Are any of these guns worth your time? And the answer is complicated. You see, the problem here is, well, I'm just gonna be blunt with you all, SMGs are kind of bad. A very bold statement, but give me a moment to explain, it'll all make sense. So you see, here's what's wrong with every SMG in the game. They're a type of weapon that is available to every class, which leads into a huge issue. They have to be balanced around the class that it would be the most powerful on, which is the Infiltrator. With the ability to cloak, automatic weaponry like carbines and assault rifles would be extremely overpowered in the hands of the Infiltrator. This is why SMGs are so limited in range. It is because of this power limitation placed on SMGs, they simply can't pull their own weight when it comes to comparing them to, well, just about every other weapon in the game. Pick a class, any class, on any faction that is not an Infiltrator, and I can show you 3 primary weapons that outclass SMGs outside of 2 or 3 very tiny issues. It is because of this that I say SMGs are a bad type of weapon in general, just from a statistical standpoint alone. So this review will not take into account how those weapons work out on every other class, and we're just going to be looking at the Infiltrator. So, from the perspective of an Infiltrator, are any of these guns worth your time? And the answer is one of them. So let's start by picking them off one by one and finding out which one is actually worth your time. Starting off with the gun that I disliked the most, the MKV Suppressed. This gun was a nightmare to Auraxium. From the ground up, it's a variant on the NS-PDW, and the only way it can be explained is by example. So say you're standing in line at Tim Hortons, and yes, I know my Canadian is showing, shut up. So you're standing there for 5 minutes, and finally, there is just one more person in line in front of you. He approaches the woman behind the till, and she asks him what he would like. He opens his mouth and then says, "Give me a moment to think." That asshole right there, that is what the MKV Suppressed is. An indecisive, arrogant pain in the ass that has no clue what the hell it wants to be. Every time I look at this gun, I just ask myself, why? Why not just suppress the PDW, or the Sirius, or drink some bleach? Every one of these ideas is significantly better than using the MKV Suppressed. Moving on. Next is the NS-PDW. Now, I don't particularly care for this weapon, but I can at least level with it on what it's trying to be. Having a mid-ranged automatic weapon for the Infiltrator would be a very powerful weapon, and the NS-PDW is trying to fill that role. It's just a shame that it brings so little to the table. Being the longer range, slower firing of the bunch, we need to figure out at what ranges the NS-PDW starts to take a clear advantage over the other SMGs, and that range seems to be about 30 meters. But yet again, we run into the same problem as we had before. There are just other weapons available to the infiltrator that seem to outclass it, and the automatic scout rifles seem to have so much more to offer over the NS-PDW. At closer ranges up to about 30 meters, the NS-PDW will have some advantages over the scout rifle, but once you start reaching the ranges where the NS-PDW starts to make sense as a choice over the other SMGs, the scout rifle is already taken over and is clearly the superior one at range. The NS-PDW isn't necessarily bad, it's just in an awkward position. Not to mention the higher velocity, better accuracy, significantly better controllability of the scout rifle. That's not even including the identical times to kill up to 30 meters, at which point this scout rifle starts to jump ahead. Like I said before, it's not necessarily bad, it's just outclassed and in an awkward position. A position so awkward that the notorious sexual position known as the alligator fuckhouse starts to look like a cakewalk. But we don't live in a fantasy world, and if we did, I wouldn't be here making videos. I would be off banging hookers, drinking gin on the back of a fire-breathing dragon. I dare you to make fan art of that one, Mars. Next is the Eridani and the directive SMG, the Skorpios. They both are the fastest killing SMGs available to the Vanu Sovereignty, and both manage to simulate the feeling of becoming a wacky waving inflatable arm flailing tube man. I've used TR weapons before, I know the meaning of bad recoil patterns, but dear God, these weapons make me feel like I'm drunk, which is an amazing achievement because I usually am drunk. Are drunk. Is drunk? I don't fucking know. Where's my damn beer? I'm gonna go. Where was I again? Oh yeah, I was telling you how much the Skorpio sucks. So here's what makes the Skorpio so special. It has high velocity ammo on it and slightly more aim down sights accuracy. And I gotta be honest with you guys, I'm not sure what's worse. The idea of trying to turn the Eridani into a long range SMG, or the crack that the person who designed this weapon was on. It's really bad. And here's why. First of all, the high velocity ammo is useless. Adding 18 extra meters per second changes nothing. And the extra 8 meters before minimum damage is a teeny tiny buff over the default. Or you know, you could use soft point ammo, which is about 10 times better. The Skorpios, the MKV suppressed, and the NS-PDW all have something in common that makes them subpar weapons in my opinion. They take an SMG, a type of weapon which is heavily limited in range on purpose, and try to make them better at range. So that leaves us with two weapons, the Sirius and the Eridani. One weapon I would pick and the other weapon I would not. Now deciding which of these two weapons would be the one that I would actually recommend really came down to a few factors. The gun that I chose was the one that out of all 5 I found to be the best in the majority of situations I found myself in. It was the easiest one for me to handle. It was the one that when I died with it in my hands, I rarely led back to the thought of I died simply because the weapon could not pull through for me. It was the only one that I want to go back and use again, and most of all, it was the only gun that actually made sense to use on other classes outside of the Infiltrator. And that gun is the Sirius. There is no doubt in my mind that the Sirius is the best of the bunch, and here's why. First of all, it fixes one of the biggest issues that I have with SMGs. I find myself constantly debating whether or not I should be choosing the extended magazine attachment or the laser sight. But the Sirius has a default magazine size of 50 rounds, so that pretty much means I can have both. On top of all that, it's actually relatively easy to control the weapon, you just need to know how. I explained earlier in the video that the left and right kick produced by the weapon actually comes from a recoil mechanic known as recoil tolerance. The explanation as to what exactly is happening here is very long and boring, so here's what you need to know. Do not try to fight the left or right kick produced by the weapon. Simply compensate for its vertical recoil. If you do this, it is extremely easy to stay on your target because the horizontal recoil sort of compensates for itself on this gun. And at the ranges where the left and right pull is going to have you missing your targets, you're already far outside of the range that the gun is effective at. The only thing I can say that the Sirius is lacking is a faster time to kill, but SMGs being what they are, I can only ask for so much. The higher fire rate SMGs tend to be far too difficult to control and really are only effective at very, very close ranges, as where the slower firing ones feel like they're outclassed by scout rifles or feel like they're steaming piles of crap like the MKV suppressed is. Now before I end this video, I do want to leave you all with one last thought. Although I don't think most of these weapons are all that good, you can be relatively effective with all of them. When you're playing as an infiltrator, honestly, your cloaking is your weapon and the gun in your hands is just what you're using to secure the kill. A skilled player will always be able to use their cloak to get them in a position where it's relatively easy to take down their target, regardless of what gun is in their hands. Except for the MKV suppressed, that gun is just garbage, don't touch it. Anyways guys, that's it for this time. My name's iGoRawr, my edict is exhausted, and I'll see you all next time. But first, a sneak peek at an upcoming project. Hello ladies and gentlemen, my name is iGoRawr.
What the f*** are you doing in here?
You die from that.
Why are you destroying your own turret?
Cause I get... Wait, what was that guy's name? I sucked off a what?
Wait, what?
I sucked off a
I sucked He bite me.
I sucked off a horse, he bite me. Okay then. VS never fails to amuse.